evening, everybody. It's great to be here once again. I always say it and I always mean it. Last week we talked about King Solomon and King Rehoboam. I don't know if I even pronounced that right. I always get it wrong. I think I got it wrong, but that's okay. None of us are perfect. I know some might think they are, but I'm not perfect. But we talked about both of them last week. I was going to do King Abijah, but I did not. But this evening we are going to get into King Abijah, King Asa, King Jehoshaphat, and King Jehoram. Now, I know what you're thinking to yourself. Well, it's going to be a long, long night. Yes, it is. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I got to try to keep this 30 to 40 minutes. I don't want them to be long. I try to keep them short and to the point. I give overviews of these, so it's a lot easier for folks to understand a little bit better, get a little bit better grasp on it. Because if you're anything like me, you don't have 2 hours to listen to people go on and get into some fine details. Now, there are those, if you want to sit down and watch a long 1 to 2 to 3 hour documentary, go for it. I don't have a problem with it. If you got the time, excellent. But most people work for a living, and they don't have all the time in the world to sit around all day and listen to these. So I try to make these, for lack of better phrasing, a Reader's Digest version. And it's not Reader's Digest, but that's the only thing I can think of to say at this point to describe it. So, enough of my nonsense monologuing here. Let's get right into it. As I said, we're going to start with King Abijah. So, King Abijah, also known as Abijam, is a relatively brief but significant figure in the Hebrew Bible, primarily mentioned in 1 Kings chapter 14, I think 15 as well, and 2 Chronicles chapter 13. He was the son of Rehoboam and the grandson, of course, of Solomon, ruling as a king of Judah. We're going to talk a little bit briefly about his reign and character. Abijah's reign lasted 3 years, and this was around 913 to 911. Only a couple of years. That's why it was just so brief. The biblical aspect of this, or the story behind it, is all biblical. It portrays him as a king who, while he did not fully follow the way of the Lord, made some notable decisions that reflected his commitment to the Davidic line. Despite his shortcomings, the scriptures highlight that Abijah did not fully abandon the worship of God. He continued some of the religious practices established by his forefathers. Although the presence of high places and idolatry persisted still during his reign. We look at a little bit of the military conflict he was involved in. One of the most notable episodes of Abijah's reign is his conflict with Jeroboam, the king of the northern kingdom of Israel. In 2 Chronicles chapter 13, Abijah delivers a rather powerful speech before battle, asserting the legitimacy of his kingship and the covenant between God and David's lineage. He emphasizes that Judah has remained faithful to God, contrasting it with Israel's idolatry. The battle, of course, ends with a significant victory for Abijah and Judah, attributed to God's favor due to their fidelity to the Davidic line, or the Davidic covenant. The victory not only solidifies Abijah's position, but also serves as a reminder of divine support for the rightful kingship of David's line. So we see Abijah's legacy is kind of somewhat mixed. While he demonstrates loyalty to God, his reign also reflects the ongoing struggles of Judah against idolatry and eternal strife. He is often seen as a transitional figure, paving the way for his more righteous son, Asa, who would later reform or put in reforms and strengthen the kingdom. Abijah's victories serve to illustrate the theme of divine favor resting on those who uphold the covenant with God. When we look at the contrast between Israel and Judah, his reign highlights the division between the two kingdoms and the differing paths they take regarding worship and governance. Some of the Abijah's primary adversaries were Jeroboam, the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, and his army. The conflict between Abijah and Jeroboam is particularly highlighted in 2 Chronicles chapter 13. Jeroboam, being one of his adversaries as the first king of the northern tribes after the division of the kingdom, Jeroboam sought to consolidate his power and prevent any loyalty to the Davidic line in Judah. His reign is characterized by idolatry, including the establishment of golden calves as objects of worship in Bethel and Dan. The confrontation between Abijah and Jeroboam escalates into a battle where Abijah leads the army of Judah against Jeroboam's forces. In 2 Chronicles chapter 13, verse 3, it is noted that Abijah assembles an army of 400,000 men, while Jeroboam gathers 800,000, highlighting the significant highlighting the number difference and the advantage of the northern kingdom. Abijah's address to Jeroboam before the battle emphasizes the spiritual dimension of their conflict. He argues that Jeroboam's rebellion against the Davidic line and his establishment of idol worship puts him at odds with God. This sets the stage for the ensuing battle, which is ultimately portrayed as a fight not just for territory, but for the faithfulness to God. When we look at the outcome, the battle concludes with a decisive victory for Abijah, attributed to God's support for Judah due to their adherence to the covenant. This victory reinforces Abijah's claim to legitimacy and underscores the importance of fidelity to God in the midst of conflict. Now I'd like to move on to, it was rather brief. It wasn't a long reign for him, was it? We could go deeper, but like I said, we try to keep this short and to the point and try to do a nice overview. Next, I'd like to move on to King Asa. King Asa reigned over Judah for 41 years and is described, from 911 to 870, roughly thereof. So anyways, and I got sidetracked for a second there. It is described, I think, in, 1 Kings chapter 15 and 2 Chronicles 14 and 16. His reign is marked by significant religious reforms and military achievements, but also, as any king does, they have moments of failure. When we look at his religious reforms, Asa is notable for his commitment to removing idolatry. In 2 Chronicles chapter 14, verse 3, it is stated that he took away the altars of the strange gods in high places, which indicates a strong desire to return the people of Judah to the worship of God. He commanded the people to seek the Lord, and during his reign, Judah enjoyed peace and prosperity as a result of these reforms. 2 Chronicles chapter 14, verses 6 and 7. Now we take a brief look at military victories. Asa faced an invasion from Zerah the Ethiopian, who led a vast army against Judah. Asa sought the Lord, and through faith he achieved a remarkable victory, which was in 2 Chronicles chapter 14, verse 11. This event illustrates Asa's reliance on God in times of crisis. Then there was the alliance with Aram. In his later years, Asa made a strategic alliance with Ben-Hadad of Aram, could be Aram too, against Israel, which was a departure from his earlier reliance on God. The prophet Hananiah rebuked him for his decision, emphasizing that God is capable of delivering without human alliances. And that was in 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verses 7 and 9. Asa's reaction to this rebuke reveals a more troubling aspect of his character. Instead of repenting, he imprisoned the prophet, showing a resistance to divine correction, much like people today, unfortunately. Then there was the decline and the unfortunate disease. Asa suffered from a foot disease later in life. Instead of seeking the Lord for healing, he relied on physicians, which symbolizes a shift away from his earlier faithfulness. This is often seen as a sign of his declining trust in God. When it comes to his legacy, Asa is remembered as a king who started strong, demonstrated faith and commitment to reform, but then faltered in his later years. I think his story serves as a reminder of the importance of consistency in faith and the dangers of relying on human strength rather than God's guidance. King Asa's reign is a compelling story or event. It's not a story. Story would suggest it's made up. Some will say it is. It's not. Of faith, reform, military success, and ultimately the challenges of maintaining that faith. His life reflects the complexities of human nature and the necessity of constant reliance on God's guidance throughout one's life. The lessons from Asa's reign resonates with the themes of integrity, faithfulness, and the consequences of turning away from God. King Asa of Judah faced his several notable enemies and adversaries during his reign, like Zerah the Ethiopian and Baasha of Israel, the Israelite kingdom, and even false prophets. Zerah had a massive army against Asa. It was described as a significant threat. Asa sought the Lord and through faith achieved a decisive victory over him in 2 Chronicles chapter 14, verses 9 through 15. Baasha, the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, posed a threat to Judah. He fortified Ramah to block Asa's movements, prompting Asa to seek an alliance with Ben-Hadad of Aram to counter Baasha's influence. You can find that in 1 Kings chapter 15, verses 16 through 20, and 2 Chronicles chapter 16. Throughout his reign, Asa faced ongoing conflict with the northern kingdom of Israel, particularly during the reigns of kings like Jeroboam and Baasha, as tensions and hostilities persisted between the two kingdoms. Asa also encountered spiritual adversaries in the form of false prophets and idol worshippers, which he actively sought to remove during his religious reforms. These adversaries illustrate the challenges Asa faced in both the military and spiritual arenas. Next, I'd like to move on now to King Jehoshaphat. King Jehoshaphat reigned over Judah for 25 years, from 870 to 848, roughly thereof. And his reign is primarily located in 1 Kings chapter 22 and 2 Chronicles chapter 17 through 20. He is known for his efforts to reform Judah's worship practices, his military alliances, and his reliance on God during times of crisis. Jehoshaphat began his reign by seeking to turn Judah back to the worship of God. He also removed the high places and encouraged the people to follow the law of Moses in 2 Chronicles chapter 17. He appointed judges throughout the land to uphold justice and righteousness, emphasizing the importance of godly leadership. Jehoshaphat formed an alliance with King Ahab of Israel through marriage in 2 Chronicles chapter 18. While this strengthened political ties, it is also known to have led him into a precarious situation, notably when he accompanied Ahab into battle against Ramoth Gilead. His alliance with Ahab serves as, again, a cautionary tale about the dangers of compromising one's values for political gain. One of the more notable events in Jehoshaphat's reign was his response to the threat from a coalition of enemy nations, which we find in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, Rather than relying on military strength, he called for a nationwide fast and sought God's guidance. God responded through the prophet Jehaziel, assuring them of victory. Jehoshaphat's faith led to a miraculous victory as the enemy turned on each other, demonstrating the power of trusting in God. Jehoshaphat's later years were marked by further alliances, including one with Ahaziah of Israel, which ended rather poorly, in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. This emphasizes the need for discernment in relationships with folks and discernment in decisions. He also focused on strengthening Judah's defenses and engaging in trade, which reflected a balance of spiritual commitment and practical governance. And that's found in 2 Chronicles chapter 17 as well. We can look a little bit at the legacy of Jehoshaphat, who would be remembered as a king who sought to honor God and lead all his people in righteousness. His story illustrates the importance of faith, the consequences of poor alliances, and the power of prayer, certainly in times of trouble. His reign definitely stands as a testament to the blessings that come from seeking God first and trusting him in every circumstances. You could say that King Jehoshaphat's life offers valuable lessons on leadership, faith, and the importance of aligning our decision with God's will. We can reflect on his reign. We can be encouraged to seek God in our own lives, trusting in his guidance and strength as we navigate the challenges and opportunities in our own life. King Jehoshaphat of Judah faced several notable enemies and adversaries during his reign. Among them were the Moabites and the Ammonites. One of the most significant threats came from the coalition of the Moabites and Ammonites, and others who united against Judah in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. This invasion prompted Jehoshaphat to seek God's guidance, and again led to a miraculous victory. And although he did form that alliance with Ahab through marriage, that relationship did lead him into a dangerous situation during the battle of or for Ramoth Gilead. Jehoshaphat's participation in this conflict, influenced, unfortunately, by Ahab, again illustrates the challenges of alliances with those who do not share the same values. Jehoshaphat's reign was marked by significant military and political challenges. His story shows the importance of faith in God during times of crisis, the dangers of unwise alliances, and the need for discernment in leadership. Despite these adversities, Jehoshaphat's reliance on God and commitment to reforming Judah's worship practices ultimately defined his legacy. Now we're going to move into King Jehoram. Jehoram also would be spelled Joram. He was also a king of Israel who followed after King Jehoshaphat. He had reigned roughly between 848 and 841. His reign is primarily recorded in 2 Kings 1 and 9 and 2 Chronicles 21-22. He is often remembered for his wickedness, his involvement in the political intrigues of his time, and his tragic end was an interesting story, an interesting tale, an interesting event. I'd like to remind you that all of my studies come from the King James Bible. Very rarely will I ever use any outside sources unless I think it really pertains to add something that is important to know. But I don't usually use outside things. All things are taken from the King James Bible and 99.9% nowhere else. But I will let you know when and if and how I use any outside sources. Let's talk about his background a little bit and his accession to the throne. Jehoram was the son of Ahab and Jezebel. Two of the most, or two, maybe, I don't know about most, maybe two of the more infamous figures in the Bible. His mother Jezebel was a Phoenician princess who promoted the worship of Baal in Israel. And his father Ahab was an idolatrous king who did much evil in the sight of the Lord. And you can find that in 1 Kings chapter 16, verses 30 through 33. In Jehoram's early life, which takes place in 2 Kings chapter 3 and 2 Chronicles chapter 21, Jehoram succeeded his brother Ahaziah, who had died from injuries. Suffered after falling through a lattice in his upper chamber. Ahaziah's death ended the reign of the house of Ahab over Judah, as his mother was the daughter of Ahab, and she sought to rule in place of her son. You find that in 2 Kings chapter 11. Jehoram became king of Judah after Ahaziah's death, and he took the throne at the age of roughly 32, reigning for the 8 years I mentioned before. You can find that information in 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 16 and 18. In Chronicles chapter 21, it is stated that Jehoram continued the wicked practices of his father and mother, including idolatry. He married Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, which was a politically strategic alliance, but also led him further into the worship of Baal and idolatries associated with his in-laws. In-laws. Even today we have jokes about the in-laws and people hating their in-laws. When we take a look at the idolatry and a bit of his evil reign, so to speak, lack of better phrasing, we look in 2 Kings chapter 3 and 2 Chronicles chapter 21. Jehoram's reign was characterized by evil in the eyes of God. He walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, the northern kingdom, particularly the house of Ahab, and did evil in the sight of the Lord. His marriage to Athaliah is noted in the Bible as a significant influence in leading him away from the worship of God. The idolatry of Baal worship, which his parents had promoted, continued under Jerome's reign in Judah. At this point, I'm humbly asking that you give me grace when I pronounce some of these names. I don't care how long I've been reading the Bible. Sometimes I don't get the names right all the time. So thank you. In 2 Chronicles chapter 21, Jehoram is said to have built high places in Judah and caused the people to commit adultery, leading to a time of great spiritual decline. He also shed much innocent blood during the murder of his own brothers, which brought judgment upon his reign in 2 Chronicles chapter 21. About these high places that existed, this is a sidebar or a side note. When Jesus was talking to Peter and them at the cave, that the gates of hell, and at the cave where it used to be named after Pan, and they would put their little idol gods of Pan up in the high places above that cave, where they felt that all the demons were coming from that cave, which they considered hell. So when Jesus was standing on that rock saying about the gates of hell, that was the gates of hell, and above that cave was the different idols up in the high place. So that was just a side note. That's what you get from a live recording. I don't edit anything out. All right, let's get into Jehoram's conflicts and some of his problems. We'll look at the invasion by the Philistines and Arabians, which took place in 2 Chronicles chapter 21. During his reign, Jehoram faced invasion from the Philistines and the Arabians. These enemies attacked Judah, looted the royal place, and carried away Jehoram's wives and children, leaving him only his youngest son, Ahaziah. This disaster was seen as part of God's judgment upon Jehoram for his wickedness and idolatry. Additionally, Jehoram suffered from a disease of the bowels that was divine punishment. The Bible records that Jehoram's death was painful and humiliating, and it did not come in a dignified manner. His illness lasted for 2 years, and he died a slow and painful death, with no one lamenting his passing. Now we look at Jehoram's interaction with Elisha and the prophets. Elisha's role in this, 2 Kings chapter 3. During Jehoram's reign, he interacted with the prophet Elisha, who played an important role in the politics and military events of that time. When Jehoram aligned himself with the king of Israel, Jehoram of Israel, to fight against Moab, he sought the counsel of Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 3. Elisha prophesied victory for the Israelites over the Moabites, but the prophecy was conditional on the people's faithfulness to God. In the account in 2 Kings chapter 6, Elisha also demonstrated his role as a prophet of God in the midst of war, delivering strategic insights that helped Israel win battles. However, despite these moments of prophetic intervention, Jehoram's overall reign did not lead to true repentance or spiritual renewal. In 2 Chronicles chapter 21, Jehoram died in great pain, and his death marked the end of his reign, which was considered one of failure and disobedience to God. His passing was followed by his son Ahaziah succeeding him. Though Ahaziah's reign was also brief and disastrous. The Bible comments that no one mourned Jehoram's death, and he was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. That was a sign of disgrace. This reflects his poor spiritual legacy as a king who did evil in the sight of the Lord and led Judah further into idolatry. In the broader spect or the broader context of Israel, Jehoram and his reign was marked by a complex relationship with the northern kingdom of Israel. He had an alliance with Jehoram of Israel, the son of Ahab, and both kings faced challenges from foreign invaders such as Moab. The two kings allied against Mesha, the king of Moab, but the alliance was not enough to secure lasting peace or stability for either kingdom. The focus in the books of the Kings of Chronicles on the northern kingdom is much greater than the southern kingdom, Judah, during this period. But Jehoram's brief reign and his wickedness stand in stark contrast to some of the more righteous kings of Judah, like Asa or Hezekiah. Jehoram's life is a reminder of the serious consequences of idolatry. His reign marked a time of spiritual decline in Judah, where his alliances with Israel and the influence of his wicked wife Athaliah, led Judah further into idolatry and immorality. His failure to repent and turn to God brought judgment upon his kingdom. Despite Jehoram's wickedness, God's patience was evident for a time, as he allowed him to reign for 8 years. However, judgment eventually came through foreign invasions and personal affliction. Jehoram's death serves as a sobering warning about the cast and cost of unrepentant sin. Jehoram's relationships within his family and his political alliances had a rather profound effect on his reign. His marriage to Athaliah and his involvement in the politics of Israel influenced the course of events in Judah, culminating in his downfall. In conclusion of his life, Jehoram's reign is characterized by wickedness, spiritual decline, and the tragic consequences of turning away from God. His alliances, particularly with Israel and the idolatrous practices of his parents, led Judah into deeper sin. Despite the occasional prophetic interventions, such as through Elisha, Jehoram's reign ended in failure, marked by violence, the loss of his family, and a slow, painful death. His legacy serves again as another cautionary tale about the dangers of idolatry, the importance of spiritual fidelity, and the inevitable judgment that comes with rebellion against God. Again, I appreciate you listening to the Kings series that we're doing all the way to the end, Northern and Southern Kingdoms. Thank you for tuning in and listening. I hope it's been helpful in a way to get a brief overview so you have a little bit quicker understanding of things. Yes, you should dive in deeper into all these chapters, but I wanted to give you an overview so it helps you get a little bit more grasp on these things and a little bit more knowledge. Not that I'm smarter or better than you, I'm just trying to do my best to put the stuff out there. Thank you for listening, and with that, I will say God bless and have a wonderful evening. Good night.